Hi guys, welcome back. In this video, we're going to go through how to use the if function in making a calculated decision on Excel. Let's take a look at the structure of this lecture. We'll start with a calculated decision making scenario analysis and how the if function can be utilized to perform this. We'll then examine the if function, and before we end the lecture, we'll go over an illustration of the if function on Excel and run through the exercise for this lecture. Let's take a look at a typical decision-making problem that can be solved by the if function. Let's say that you're hunting for a new car. Your budget in the bank is about $25,000, and you're only willing to spend up to $25,000 and not a cent more. You've seen this car A, which has a price tag of $24,999. The calculated decision-making problem here is then to determine whether or not car A is within your budget. So if we applied the concept behind the if function to this particular problem, we would start with first deciding if the $24,999 is less or equal to $25,000, your budget. If true, then we would label it as within budget. If false, then we would label it as out of our budget. Well, in our example, car A will be labeled as within budget because it is less than $25,000. Alright, let's now examine the elements of the if function. The if function has three user inputs, otherwise known as arguments, and here's the syntax for it. Let's take a closer look at the scenario that we spoke about earlier. The first argument is the logical test. The logical test is the test whereby the price tag of car A was compared against the budget amount of $25,000. The logical test incorporates at least one comparison operator. In our example, the comparison was less than or equal to. The second argument is the action or value if the logical test result returns true. In our case, the action that we would like the if function to do when the logical test returns true is to mark this particular line as within budget. The third argument is the action or value if the logical test returns false. In our case, if the logical test returns false, we would like to mark it as out of budget. It's quite simple, isn't it? All it takes to understand the if function is basic mathematics concept of using the comparison operators. Okay, so let's take a look at how to use the if function on Excel. Here, we've got a list of all the new vehicles in the market. Your decision-making problem is to comb through this massive list of 4,350 different models of car to determine the ones that are within your budget. Guys, these prices aren't real, so don't get too excited, alright? Anyhow, let's carry on. Remember our syntax from earlier in this lecture? Here it is. Okay, so let's apply it to this problem. The first argument is a cell reference to cell E3. The price of the car compared against our budget amount on cell H3. The second argument is the value if the logical test returns true. That is if the logical test returns less than or equal to the budget. The action would then be to mark it within budget. The third argument is the value if the logical test returns false. That is if the logical test returns larger than the budget, the action would then mark it as out of budget. Okay, so let's see what this gives us. Excellent, that looks correct. 57K is certainly larger than 25,000. Let's now copy this function down by double-clicking the bottom right corner of this cell. Excellent. Moving on, now that you've seen the if function in action, let's take a look at the exercise for this lecture. So you get to give it a go. In this lecture exercise, your task is to determine out of this list the cars that are made by BMW. You'd probably be saying this to yourself, this can be performed easily by using the filter function. Yes, that is true, but that's not the goal of this exercise. The goal of this exercise is to show you that the if function goes beyond just calculated decision making. It can perform other things. And this exercise is a prime example of it. So, okay, everybody, I think that's it. That's it for this lecture. Thank you for watching another lecture of Millennial Pro. Don't forget to complete the exercise and see you in the next one. Ciao.